Alright everybody, welcome back to another Ask a Dev Unreal Engine tutorial. My name's Kevin. Today we are going to be continuing our control rig adventures, and it is time. It is time for us to start to clean up our blueprints. We're going to be creating some functions, and we're going to be doing some work to make our control rigs a little bit more procedural, largely in advance of what we hope is coming with our previews in 5.4, which are basically reusable rigging components. So let's take a look at converting a couple things and why we're doing it. Here we are in Unreal Engine, and what we have is we have our control rig so far. You can see the graphs getting a little bit crazy. And this is basically just everything we've done so far up to FK-IK snapping. And what I want to do is clean this up. And we're going to be doing this two different ways. One, we're going to be doing functions. We're going to functionify this stuff. I'm not sure that's a word, but anyways, we're going to be making a bunch of functions, clean this up, and then also we're going to do some changes to make it a little more procedural. So let's start with the function stuff first. Now, in general, I have found that there are a couple of finicky things with control rig, and so there are times, don't be surprised if you try something and you have to redo it or try at it a couple times. And let me show you an example of what I'm talking about, where what you can do is if we let's duplicate this. I'm going to duplicate this, and what I'm going to do is let's pretend we're going to do this for the right leg, for example. I'm going to connect this in right here. Okay, now if I wanted to, over here in my blueprint, I can create a new function here, but then you have to define a whole bunch of initial parameters. You have to copy all your nodes over, etc. Rather than doing that, you can pick all of these, right click, and choose collapse to function. Now when we do that, you'll notice right away we have an error. The reason for that is because if we go inside of our function, your function needs to have a return, and in here, the default return, it's not connecting. And in general, the other problem with this is, even though we've created a function, you'll notice that the function we created is a dead end. It doesn't have an output pen. So rather than doing it this way, let's delete this. Let's delete this new function. And what we're going to do is, if all we have is a simple extra node at the end, I'm just putting that in there temporarily. Now what's going to happen when we right click to create our function, it's going to create collapse to function. This time I'm going to name our function. I'm going to call this util. And this is going to be this is aligning our FK to our IK. So this is going to be align FK to IK. Now, we still have an error, but it is, when we go in now, you'll notice that we have this output pin. We have a return node. All we need to do is connect this to the absolute final path of our node network, basically. So if I just connect this up to onComplete, when I compile this now, you'll notice that this compiles, which is great. The other thing that's important to note is when we look at this, it automatically sets up the outputs correctly because I had an output connected here in the rig with this print string. And the great thing about that is now, if I want to continue on, I'm ready to go. So a couple other things that we want to do inside of here. Right now, we take an item array, and in this case, the items that we're passing in, these are all of our FK controls. What I want to do is I want to take this, and I want to promote this to a variable, for example. So if we take this array and we just drag it onto our entry, it'll actually just add the array for us. Now I want to be a little bit more explicit about what this thing is called, because this is our controls. These are our FK controls. So now we can pass those in as a variable and connect them straight in. And now this function will work to align any of our FK controls to our IK. There's one more quick fix we need to make in here, but before we do that, let's make sure we grab our control array, this is our left array. We're going to plug this in. Okay, and then we would also do the same thing for the right side, but we would just give it a different array. So now we've set it up so we don't have to repeat our code. Now, before we go into the next section, let me go ahead and address one thing in here. We do have this IK enable check in here. We don't technically need this because in our rig, before we even come into this branch, if we follow this back up, we check to see if our IK enabled is here anyways. Part of converting this to a function is going to be understanding how to compartmentalize, create variables, organize, and do all of those things that make sense so that we can just drag and drop it in that future world where we have procedural rig builds. So that means down here inside of our align FK to IK, I can actually get rid of this and I can just go straight into our for each loop, and I do need to connect this to our completed. So at this point, we have successfully created the util align FK to IK. Now, I am not going to bore you all with converting all of these to functions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be doing a time-lapse version of that. Once I get all of the functions done, we can come back and I can explain to you any of the nuances that I found along the way. But most of it is going to be changing a lot of these things. So for example, where it has left foot, we're going to pass that in as a variable. That way we can call FK, we can call the IK leg for either left or right side. So we're going to be converting that to a variable. We are going to be converting all of these bones, thigh, calf, foot. These are all going to get converted to variables. That's what I mean when I talk about making this a little bit more function friendly, so it's more reusable. And then rather than calling all of this, we can basically just call it with left and right. That's it. So that's what we're going to be doing. But before we do that and we get into time lapse, there's one more piece that I wanted to talk about as far as proceduralization goes. And that is, for now, if you recall when we set up our FK, when we set up our foot roll in particular, we created these null nodes, one for the heel and one for the toe. And what it required was we had to go into, let me go ahead and collapse this down. We had to go into our foot and we actually added these heel and toe refs. Well, the problem with that is every new character that comes in, I would then have to open the skeleton, I would have to add the toe ref, I would have to get it in the right place. No, let's just do that procedurally. So we can do that procedurally, and we can do that by doing what is called an add null. So let's go ahead and we're going to do it in line here. Hold on, I want to make sure I get this right so I don't confuse you all. Okay, so what I want to do is right here, and this is going to be two steps. What we're going to do is we're going to change the nulls that we're adding. We're going to spawn them in. So let's go ahead and let's find where we're referencing these. Oh, they're being referenced down below. So what we're going to do is let's just add a pin to this. And this is going to change slightly once we do the procedure, once we convert this to functions. Reason being is because what we're going to do is in the functions, we're going to create a function for initialization of the IK leg, for example, and we would probably put that in here. But what I want to do is, in the case when we first start off, I want to simply spawn a null. And the null that I'm going to spawn is going to be parented to a bone. And in this case, we're going to do the right foot because I already have the left foot done. I don't have the right foot done. So over here in our right foot, what I want to do is the bone that I'm going to spawn this to is going to be the same. So this one is going to go to the ball. So let's take this and put this under the right ball. And we're going to name this for now. This is going to be, this needs to be a better name actually, because not having it it basically needs to be side aware. So let's call this, yeah, we'll call it ball underscore right underscore toe ref. Okay, Now, then we do need to set our default transform. And what I'm going to do is we are going to, the transform that we currently set for these, if we look at our toe ref, you'll notice we have 7100. So let's go ahead and make this 710, and we can connect that in. And we do want to set that into local space, but recall, because this is the right side, we do need to reverse these. So we want this to go out the front, and this is something that we're going to have to account for when we make our initialization. When we set up our initialization as an actual function, we'll need to be able to accommodate left and right side. So you can see here what we've done now is we've spawned this null. The null is actually going to be called the ball right toe ref, which is great. And then we would do the same thing, and let's just go ahead and move this up. Let's spawn another null. This one is going to be the ball right heel ref. It is also going to get a transform, so let's copy and paste this. And once again, because it's the right side, we are going to, or I'm sorry, because it's the right side, I want to make sure we get these values right. We're going to go for this character, and this would probably be a parameter we would want to pass in, -10, -5, connect this in. Rather than pairing this to the ball, this is going to get parented to the foot right. Now, when we do that, that is going to give us our foot right, although our directions are wrong currently. You can see it's kind of going up. So let's make sure we have that right. Let's try +10. Okay, great. And we need to go +5. All right, so that gets our heel and our toe ref nulls created procedurally. So what that means is I no longer have to I don't have to go in and change my hierarchy. You can see them showing up here in the hierarchy in yellow. It's telling me that these are being built on the fly as part of our construction script. So now when I go to build out the IK setup for the right foot with the reverse foot, with the foot roll and everything, these are created for me. And if I get a new character, I don't have to go in and add, I don't have to remember what nodes did I add to make the whole right foot setup work. It's just going to have its own initialized function. So we can do this kind of proceduralization, if you will, adding our nulls in on the fly. We can do it with all kinds of things. Like if you look at the spawn list, and we're going to be doing this as we move forward, we can spawn bones, nulls, controls, all kinds of stuff. And we can do all that procedurally, which is great. So with this combined with the functions, at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend time basically just going through this in time-lapse fashion, converting all of this to nice, clear, concise functions that do a couple of things. So my goal here as we go through this time lapse is we already have the utility for the aligning the FK to the IK. We're going to build a utility that is going to take all of this. Let's see here. This is the utility that we use for aligning IK to FK. This we're going to turn into a function, and we can do that simply by right-clicking and collapsing that to a function. So that's going to become a function, which is great. And then this is going to be our FK solve. We could convert this. This is going to be like our FK forward leg, for example. And then let's see. And once again, I'm going to go ahead and continue with my paradigm for right now. This is going to be the util align IK to FK. And then what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to go in here and I'm going to have to convert a bunch of this stuff to variables so I can handle right and left side. So that's what this time lapse is going to be. Sit back. I'll come back here in a second and show you any of the nuances or points of interest that I found along the way, and we will be ready to go for our next video. All right, everybody, this was a beast. it was largely because of a couple bugs that I was chasing that I created myself, and partially because I decided to go full procedural. And what that means is as I was building out fixing the left leg, I realized I was gonna have to redo everything for the right leg. And when I say full procedural, I went ahead and set it up so even all the hierarchy, control structure, everything is all created on the fly now. So let me take you on a quick little tour of where we landed. All right, so this is now our cleaned up control rig, our main event graph. And if we take a look at our construction, it's pretty basic. We have our COG control. The only reason I need this right now is Epic, if you're listening, I would really like to be able to tag controls so I can make decisions on what I'm building based on the tags. But anyways, this initialized the generic FK controls, super basic. It's exactly what I described earlier on. All you do is click on this. All I did is right click, choose make function, and pretty basic stuff. Where I started going a little bit crazy is down here in this left and right leg stuff. This is where I decided to go fully procedural, and you can see here the entire initialization of the leg is dependent on a few bones, a few controls, and a few nulls. Now, technically speaking, we don't even need these nulls anymore. I'm pretty sure they're not used, and we'll try to delete it here in a second. The controls are also, well, we do use the FK controls, but we could also build those on the fly. Anyways, point is, we'll get into it. Here's the initial leg. Now, this looks like a lot. It's not too bad. So here we go. We come in. This is basically, let's clean this up a little bit. This is our entry. We have a sequence so we can get our return at the end of it. This first box I've commented. This is exactly what I showed you earlier. This is the procedural spawning of the heel and the toe refs. Now, where this gets interesting is what I did was I added the idea of a flip axis variable, so you could do left and right, and then depending on what that is, it will make these transforms to flip them. Now, this is fairly specific to this rig. Right now these values are. I would probably have to variabilize this as well and potentially pass them in, or use distance measuring, etc. But this is a great start. Same thing for the heel ref. Up here, once again, this is literally just setting up the foot controls, and the only thing special about this is, I'm spawning a transform control instead of a null, going ahead and spawning the animation channels as well. These are for our foot rolls. That's all well and good. Now, the one thing that I wanted to show you, pole vector, again, just spawning the controls and the transforms. But the one thing I wanted to show you was, once again, here we have this if. And this if is set up so that we can, if we have a flip axis, we are changing the rotation of the actual shape control on the knee. The question I wanted to point out, or the thing I wanted to point out, was these little guys. These are basically a way for me to have a different value for the rotations based on the flip axis without having to plug it in. So what I did to create this, just so that you know, is if you just type cast, you can create a cast node. This cast node it basically has no type until you connect it to something. So if I were to create a 2 Euler, for example, and I connect into the rotations, you'll see that it converts this cast node to be what I want. And then what I can do is when I click on this, now I have the ability to change these values. So this, I basically created one for -90 and one for 90 and plugged those in. That's where these little guys came from. That's how I made it. You can copy and paste them, etc. So that's our pole vector setup. Now all of this, it looks crazy, but it's not. This is literally just us spawning all of our nulls, setting the transform, setting the control shapes, and even using, we are setting our shape settings using a making of the shape settings. And this is where we're getting usually I'm getting my secondary color for these, which is controlling the lighter blues, etc. Now, so this is what the initialize looks like. The interesting thing about this is if we scroll down, you'll notice that when we take a look at our rig hierarchy, everything down here is in yellow. What that means is it's all procedurally built. It's all built on the fly. And this way, I'm in a much better position to respond to the modules, to make edits, to mirror left and right, to create 4 legs in a character or 2, etc. So that's great. I'm gonna close that down actually, because I messed that up. Let's bring back our script. Okay, so now let's take a look and see where we got to down below. Same thing below, we have our COG control. Once again, if I had tags, I could do that differently. And then we have our FK solve. This was the basic FK solve that we started with. And if we go back, then we have our forward leg, which is basically if we are in IK, we're going to do our utility to align. Basically, there's nothing special about this other than getting all of the values, doing all of the work we did during our FKIK snapping. The one thing I will note is you'll notice I have these item arrays in here. The reason I did that was I wanted to have, while I was in here getting all these controls and items it was easier to have this as like a notepad in here. That way I could kind of keep track of what was what. So that's what all those are about. But again, nothing major, no huge changes, nothing secret or sneaky in here. It's literally just getting controls, setting rotations, building the constraints, everything we did in the previous videos. And then of course, we have our IK solve, which happens. This, again, no major surprises. Everything comes from everything. It's exactly the same stuff we've done this entire time, just rebuilt. Here was the note. So that's pretty much it. I don't have any other notes on this. It'll be interesting to see how much of this converts over. And the other great thing is now I can actually duplicate a bunch of this stuff to do and finalize the arms. But we now have a rig that allows our character. Oh, actually there was one other thing. Okay, hold on. There was one other thing. The COG control, I did make some changes. So for the COG control, when I set it up, you'll notice that I'm not setting the rotation. Look at the difference between the rotation on the COG control. Right now, it is aligned to the world. If I just connect the entire transform in here, you'll notice that, don't look at the shape. The shape is confusing, okay? Remember, look at the axes here. Notice how now X is up and Z is to the right and Y is forward. This is because it's aligning to the pelvis control from a rotation standpoint. I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to position it. I want it in world space, so I'm going to leave it in world space. Once again, if I had a tag, I could just tag it as world space. Okay, so that was it. That was the last little thing that I made. I also may have done that for the feet as well. But we now have a fully working control rig. We can do all of our just straight rotations. All of our stuff works from the standpoint of being able to modify our character if I select all the proper controls at least. And at this point, we are ready. Yeah. I think that wraps this up. So that pretty much wraps up our control rig functionation and basically kind of like a tour of a bunch of cleanup. So a couple little tips in there, but this puts us in a great position to be able to continue on our control rig journey, and as well as potentially for the modules that are coming in 5.4, so we can use our own custom control rigs in that setup. Now, as always, if you have comments and feedback, throw this down in the comments below. Thank you to and shout out to the community, the Patreon group. Thanks for supporting the channel. As always, anything you can do to support the channel is great. Go ahead and help spread the word. It's awesome. And I will see you all in an upcoming live stream, which also reminds me, don't forget to check out the live area. That's where all of our live stream tutorials sit and go. My name's Kevin. Take it easy.